In this video, we're going to learn about intercepting routes in NextJs 14 by building a photo gallery project where when the user clicks on any individual photo, we're going to show a modal by intercepting that request. So instead of going to the photos/3 page, which is a dynamic ID page, we're going to show that content inside of a modal. This is intercepting that request and actually replacing it with this modal, and also using the parallel routes that we learned in a previous video on the channel to show this side by side. So you can see this modal is actually overlaying this gallery context. So we are not switching the context. We're still in the context of our gallery, but showing a preview. We can dismiss the modal, but if the user actually goes ahead and refreshes this page or punches this URL or shares this URL to somebody else and they click on it, they would just go to the actual photos/5 or that specific ID page. So we're going to go through the documentation and some theories first, and then we're going to jump into VS Code and build this project from the ground up together. But before I do that, I just want to mention that I took the inspiration for this project from a project from the vercel-lab or vercel team. It's called nextgram. It's basically the same idea. So our project is a rebuild of that gallery project by the vercel team. I'm going to include a link in the description. This is just for us to learn how we are going to implement intercepting routes and combine it with parallel routes to create this model. So now let's go back to our notes where we're going to learn about intercepting routes and see some diagrams, and then we're going to jump into VS Code and build the project together. Now the source code on GitHub for the project is going to be linked in the description. So if you want to follow along or check it out, you have it there. Now, as I mentioned, intercepting routes allow you to load a route from another part of your application within the current layout. Now, this paradigm or this concept is useful when you want to display the content of a route without switching the context. So what this means is, for example, in this app, when you click on this specific image, which is a link that's supposed to take us to this dynamic route of /photos/2, which is the ID of this specific image, instead of taking the user there and switching the context to that page, we're still on top of this gallery. So the context, the layout is the same, and we're just loading the content of another route, which is this dynamic ID route, in a modal here. Now, in this specific implementation, we're also combining this interception with the parallel route, so we can render the gallery and this modal at the same time together. If you're not comfortable with the parallel routes, we do have a video on the channel. I'm going to link it in the description or in the card somewhere. At some point in this project, when we're building, we're going to add the parallel route. So you can check that video out and learn how that works and how we combine it here with the interception. So here again, a visual example. We are clicking on a photo inside of a feed. For example, in a social media app, you could display a preview of this photo, just like how we're doing, overlaying the feed, where NextJs is actually intercepting the /photos123. This is going to that specific dynamic ID folder, is intercepting that, and then it's overlaying it over the feed. But again, if the user navigates to the photo by clicking on a shareable link or refreshes the page, they go directly to the photo page this time without seeing the modal. Now, the way that we create this intercepting routes, or the convention to create them, is by this syntax, which is similar to how you would write relative paths in your file system. So it's similar, but it is for segments and not for folders. That's an important note here. Later on, we're going to see how that plays out. But before we get there, to match the same level segment, you can use one dot inside the curly braces or parentheses or brackets. The two dots is going to go one segment above. The two together is going to go 2 levels up, and the 3 dots, it's just going to match the app folder or your app router. Now here in the same example of having a feed and also a photo, we're intercepting the photo segment from within the feed segment by creating this photo directory. So let me just make this a bit bigger. So inside of our feed, we had a layout and a page. This is where we're showing the gallery. and we have a dedicated photo and the dynamic ID page outside of this feed. But what we are saying here is that when we are inside of our feed layout, if the user is trying to navigate to the photo ID, we want to intercept that request and actually show whatever content that is in here, which is this intercepting route. That's going to match the same thing as photo ID page, photo ID page. So it's going to intercept that request, and here it's going to show a modal instead of going to that page. Again, a little note here that this convention is based on the route segments and not file systems. You're going to see what this means when we're using the parallel routes, because for creating parallel routes, we're going to use slots with the @ symbol in the beginning of the name of the folder, which is not going to create a segment. It is a folder, but it's not going to create a segment, and that's how they differ here. Let's actually go back to the documentation. By the way, these images and my notes are what I synthesized from the documentation. I'm going to also include the link in the docs. That's your best reference. Now here, we're going to actually look at this code, which is for this feed and photo example from the Next.js docs. When you go to the intercepting section or intercepting route section in the docs, you can just scroll down. This modal example is also there. As you can see here, inside of our feed, now we're putting this photos intercepting route inside of a parallel route. And the reason why we would want to do this, and we're going to see this in our own project as well, is that we want to show this modal on top of that gallery. If we don't do this, well, it's going to intercept the route and it's going to show the modal, but the gallery is not going to be there because you're intercepting the route and you're showing something else there. Now, to show them side by side, which is why you would want to use a parallel route, in a nutshell, they're just going to allow you to render multiple pages simultaneously in the same layout. It's exactly what we want here. And we're going to put everything inside of a modal. So we're now receiving this modal, parallel route, also inside of the layout in the feed, and then we show them side by side. So as you can see here, inside of this intercepted route, we're showing it the content of the photo inside of a modal. Whereas if the user just goes directly to that specific photo page, they're going to see the photo page and not the modal. Now, again, I want to touch on this convention to match segments. So here, as you can see, this intercepting route here for the photos, with the 2 dots, it's going 1 level up. Now you might think if I go 1 level up, I'm going to be at modal. I'm not going to be at the same level as this photo to intercept. Again, this is not matching folders, it is matching segments. So even though it's similar to your relative path in the file system, this is matching segments. And because this @modal is a slot, and slots in parallel routes do not create a segment, the first higher or upper level from here is going to be the feed, which is at the same level at this photos. And this is why this is working and intercepts the request to the photo. So this is this note here. Just pay attention that it's different from your folders. It's just mapping or matching segments when you're using intercepting routes. Now, the last thing I want to mention is that to complement or to complete this example from the docs, you can also go to the parallel routes documentation, scroll down at the end of the page. There's also another modal example here. That's for auth or a login modal, but you can see some conventions there in terms of how you would receive these parallel routes in the modal, working together with the intercepting. So you can combine the two examples together. Now, with that out of the way, let's jump into the code and build this project from the ground up so we can just put this things that we learned into practice. So I've started with a brand new Next.js app that's using TypeScript and Tailwind CSS. And all I had done so far is that I removed the content of the homepage that comes out of the box. This component that you can see here, that's showing this h1 tag of intercepting routes and this link that goes to our /photos page. I haven't created that page yet. We're going to create that together. Let me show you what else I have done, and then we're going to come back to the structure of our app and how we're going to go about building it. Now, I have also created this lib folder where we're exposing some photos. This is again coming from that project from Vercel team to actually render some photos. I'm exporting some type for our photos as well. And I've created two components. One is a photo card, that shows an image and some information about who this photo was taken by. So we're going to use this photo card inside different components. And I have this modal, which we're going to use to render the content of our preview image when we are rendering it on top of our gallery. I'm going to explain the details of how this works later on when time comes to use it. But for now, just know that this is the starting point of our project. Now, inside of our app, inside of our page, we're having a /photos. Now, the structure of our app is going to be a bit different from the example that we saw in the docs, where we had a feed to show the gallery of the photos, and then we had a separate folder for the photo ID dynamic route. What I want to create is to have the /photos so we can see all the photos, and then inside of it, I'm going to include a dynamic route to see specific photos. So /photos and then /1, 2, 3, the ID. And then I'm going to also include the intercepting route inside the photos to intercept itself when the user is trying to go to an individual photo from the all photos page. Let me show you this diagram to make it more clear. So inside of our app, we have this all photos. This is what we want to create. Inside of it, we're going to have a page.jsx. This is responsible for rendering all the photos. Then inside of it, we're going to have a folder with this dynamic ID route where we show individual pages. So this is for when a user just directly goes to this /photos /1, they're going to be served that specific page. But when we are inside of our photos, so when we are inside of this page where we're seeing the gallery and the user clicks on one of the images to go to /photos /ID, we want to intercept that route, and that's how we're doing it here. We're intercepting that request and showing a modal. So inside of this photos intercepting route ID and page, we're going to put the content of our specific image in a modal. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. And then later on, we're going to add the parallel route for the modal to also show them side by side. So let's go back to our application and create the first thing, which is the photos folder. Inside of it, I'm going to include a page.tsx, and I'm going to copy some code to render our photos page. So let's switch back to our application. Let me close this off. Now here, all I'm doing is I'm getting the photos from my lib folder. I'm mapping over each photo, and for each one, I'm showing a link and an image. And this link is going to /photos and that specific ID. So now let's go to the all photos page. So now we're seeing all of our photos. Now, when I click on each one of them, I want to go to this specific photos ID dynamic route. So let's create this dynamic route. So inside of our photos, I'm going to create another folder, which is a square brackets ID. This is a dynamic route. I'm going to include a page.tsx inside of here and copy some code. So let's just again close this. Inside of our photo page, we're getting the params from NextJs. We're going to get the ID out of it. We're going to filter our photos to get this specific photo. And now I'm going to show this specific photo on this page using this photo card component that we just looked at. This is going to get a photo and it's going to render an image. We'll just close this off. Okay, so let's test this out. If I click on any of these images, it's going to take me to /photos /1, which is the actual page rendering this content with this photo card. And then I can come back to photos. So up until now, we're not intercepting any requests. This is just regular stuff from Next.js to have an all photos page and an individual dynamic page for these images. Okay, so now let's create an intercepting route inside of our photos folder. Let me close this off. So at the same level as my ID, I'm going to include or create another folder that has double dots and then photos. And inside of this, I'm going to include a bracket or a dynamic ID. And then inside of this, I'm going to include a page.tsx that's responsible for rendering the UI. Let me close this off. So inside of this photo modal this time, I'm getting the params and the ID. Again, filtering through my photos, finding the photo. I'm rendering that same photo card component that we had at the page level, but this time I'm just rendering it inside of this modal. Okay, so now let's test this out. If I click on any of these images, instead of taking me to that individual dynamic ID page, it's showing me this modal. So we have successfully intercepted that request for that dynamic ID page and replaced it with this modal that's rendered by this component. Let's review one more time what happened here. Let me make this bigger and close all the files. So we had inside of our app folder, we had this photos folder. We had the page.tsx in photos. This was responsible for rendering all of the photos or our gallery here. We had this dynamic ID route, which was responsible for rendering the individual photos. So I can show you by refreshing the page. This was the individual photos page. And then we included this intercepting photos route here to say, hey, if you're inside of the gallery and the user clicks on one of these images to go to that individual page, just show them this preview modal. So we're intercepting that request. Instead of taking them to that page, we're showing them this modal. But if they directly go to that link by clicking on a shareable link or refresh the page, they can actually see that individual page just like how I did it now. So now in this case, with this photos intercepting route and ID inside of it, this was where we were just showing the content of this photo card inside of a modal. And that's how we did it here. Now, you might notice that we are not seeing the gallery here. This is not overlaying that context. It's just showing the modal. We're going to come back to this when we combine this with a parallel route. But before I get there, I just want to quickly mention how we're closing or dismissing this modal. So let's go to our component where we are actually creating this modal. Let me close this off. So this is using headless UI to create this transitions and this dialog or modal component from headless UI. I'm going to include the link in the description so you can check it out. But all we're doing here is rendering a dialog, and I'm accepting a children. Whatever you pass to it is going to be rendered inside of this dialog. Now, typically for a modal, you would have local state here, and then you would have this handle close pointing at your state to say, is the modal open or is it closed? If it is open, just close it. So that's how we typically in a React app control a modal. But here we're not using a local state. Instead, we're using the URL, and instead of setting the local state to false or to close the modal, we're just using the router to go back. Because when we go back using the router from the next navigation or the next router, it's just going to go back to the /photos where we didn't have this modal. So look, when I click outside of this modal, it just goes back to /photos where we are rendering all our photos. And when I click on this, this is the interception or intercepting route in action. It just masks the URL, shows the URL as photos /2, but it's not actually going to that page yet. It's just showing the modal. So we're intercepting that request. And only if I hard navigate to that link or refresh the page, we're going to be taken to the content of that individual dynamic ID page. So I hope you understand this implementation. Now let's actually combine this with parallel routes. So the problem was that when we are inside of a photo and when we click on it, it shows us our modal, but we can't see the gallery here. So we're going to use parallel routes to actually render both of these pages simultaneously together. Again, parallel routes in a nutshell allows you to render multiple pages in the same layout at the same time. And this is going to be a very good example of using parallel routes to show this modal on top of our photo gallery page. So what we're going to do here inside of our photos page, I'm going to create another folder. I'm going to include an @ sign in the beginning. This is how you would create slots or parallel routes inside of the app router. These slots are not going to create segments. It's just going to be a parallel route inside of it. Now inside of here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring all the contents of this intercepting route inside of this slots now. So instead of having this intercepting route being directly inside photos, I'm going to move it inside of my modal. Okay, so let's see what happened here. We copied the content of our intercepting routes into this @ modal or into this slot, which is going to allow us now to get the content of this parallel route and show it side by side inside of our photos route. So inside of our photos where we had this page.jsx, we can now include a layout.tsx, and here I'm now going to receive the content of this model. Again, if you're not comfortable with parallel routes, just watch the video that I mentioned. Besides the children that you're going to get inside of your layout, using parallel routes, you're going to get this as slots as well. So I'm now rendering them side by side, which means I have my all photos page, that's the gallery, and then I'm going to also show the model side by side or overlay that gallery. So let's just refresh our app to test this out. Now, as you can see, this is giving me a 404. Even if I go back to the home page, I can see the home page, but if I go to the photos, I'm not receiving these photos. This is because we have to have a default for this parallel route, meaning that if this modal or this parallel route is not active, we want to have something or some UI to show. And if we don't have that default.js or default UI, NextJs is going to render a 404. So to fix this inside of our @modal slot, we can include a default.tsx, and when you don't want to return anything from your default UI, you can just return null. And as you can see here, when the modal is not active, when the parallel route is not active, we want just to return nothing or have a default to return null. Otherwise, NextJS is going to return a 404. And when the modal is active, we're going to show that actual modal with a preview of our image. So now if I click on any of these images, now you can see this modal is overlaid on top of that gallery. So we are keeping that context. And what allows us to do this is this parallel route of modal, which is going to allow us inside of this layout to render the content of the all photos page, which is the children, and this modal side by side, or one over top of the other, using this parallel route. So two different concepts of intercepting a route, which was the first step that we did. So instead of showing the actual individual page, we show the modal. But in the first step, by just intercepting that request and replacing it with the modal, we didn't see the context or the gallery underneath because we're just swapping or replacing the content of our page with this modal. But we combined it now with this parallel route that's going to allow us to show these two pages simultaneously. So we intercept the route from one hand and keep that underlying gallery page underneath and show them all together. Now again, if you dismiss this modal, it's just going to hit router.back to go back to the all photos page. And then once you click, you see this. If you refresh and hard navigate to this specific page, you're going to see this individual page. Now, let me just also show you in the diagram. So this was the first implementation where we had this all photos. We had the individual ID dynamic pages. We intercepted those requests saying, hey, if you're on the gallery page and somebody wants to go to that specific ID page or photo page, just show them a modal first. And in the second implementation here, we added this parallel route to say, hey, if you're showing that modal, just put this intercepted route inside of a modal component or inside of a modal slot and show this side by side in my page, in my layout, in the all photos. So that modal is just showing or laying on top of our photos gallery. Again, I want to mention this default.js. So for parallel routes, when they're not in active state or they're not matched, you have to have this default to tell NextJS what to render when this is not active. If you don't want to render any UI, just return null from it, because if you don't have that default.ts or JS file, NextJS is going to render a 404 because there's nothing matching that specific segment or that specific slot. And that's a wrap for this lesson, folks. We learned about intercepting routes, which is an advanced routing technique in NextJS to intercept a request and show the content of that route inside of a modal or in the same context, in the same layout, without the user having to switch the context. We also combined this with the lesson that we had on parallel routes to show or render multiple pages simultaneously at the same time, so we can overlay the modal on top of our photo gallery page. Now, that's it for this lesson, and I'm going to see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye.